Hi, everybody. Welcome to week 3 of drama at JCAL. I'm so excited to be back with you guys for our third week talking about the different types of jobs in the theater. And again, my name is Miss Gareth, and welcome back. I hope everyone's had a restful week, staying healthy, staying safe, getting to still be a little bit social despite the social distancing. Maybe you're calling your friends or family or doing video chats or Zoom or things like that, but it's just a reminder to always try and check in with people here during this time because we're getting into, a few months of this quarantine process now. So just remembering to try and stay positive, and this is something that I'm looking forward to every week, and I hope you are too. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here, and we are going to begin with week 3 out of 4. So this is our second to last week of class, and I really hope that you can join us for our final class next week as well. That's going to be our last one. And so today, just going to give you a brief agenda. What we've got planned for this class today. We're going to start off with some review. Number 1, we're going to go over the 4 branches of theater that we've been talking about every week, just to refresh our memories. And then our focus this week, if you go to number 2, is about directing. So we're going to look at some famous directors. We're going to talk about what it means to be a director, the job of a director. And then when we move on to number 3, we're going to look at the types of stages, because the stage is the director's playing space. Almost similar to how a painter has a canvas, a director has a stage. So there are a few different types of stages that you might be working on if you're a director. So we're going to look at what those different types of stages are and what are the differences between those different types of stages. And then last but not least, we're going to get up on our feet and we're going to play a little bit of a physical game. So that's going to tell us a little bit about the parts of the stage. It's very important for a director to know the names of the different parts of the stages. And we'll get into why that's important a little bit later on, okay? So great. So that's our agenda for today. Let's do a little bit of review, as I just talked about. So I hope you remember what that little picture is in the middle there. You'll see we've got a happy looking mask and a sad looking mask. That is the international symbol for theater or drama, right? And the reason why those 2 masks represent drama is because when theater was first invented in the ancient Greek times, ancient Greek actors used to use masks when they were performing on stage to kind of express what that character was feeling, happy, sad, etc. But it was also used as an amplification device, because we didn't have microphones back in the day. We didn't have electronic forms of amplifying one's voice. So they had to make masks that were actually used as kind of like a megaphone to help amplify and project those voices. So, so that's the international symbol for theater. And then you've got the red curtains and the stage, just as a little bit of extra decoration. So we talked in previous weeks about how there are 4 main types of jobs in the theater. We're keeping it fairly simple. There are other jobs that I haven't really talked about and probably won't have time to talk about in the theater, but these are the main 4 branches, I would say, right? So we've got actors at the top left. Those are the kinds of people that we talked about last week. If you tuned in last Friday, we went into depth about what it means to create a character, how a performer goes about changing their voice, changing their body, and we talked a little bit about personality as well. So that was the job of the actor, was to really create a character from scratch that's different from you. We also talked about playwrights, which you'll see in the bottom right. That was in our very first week of class. Of course, the playwright is the person who writes the play. They write the story from scratch. And we started with that in the first week because kind of that's where everything starts, right? If you're about to put on a play, you need a playwright to write that play for you, right? So we've got 2 weeks left, which means we've got 2 branches, 2 jobs that we're going to be talking about this week and next week. And this week, it's a 50-50 chance, if you're guessing, we are going to be talking about directors. So directors are the people in the theater that control what the audience will experience in a production, okay? So they are kind of the leaders, I would say, of the whole piece, right? So a director has to have really good leadership skills because they're in charge of a lot of people, right? So they have to really make sure that they are a good, strong leader. And they also have to make sure that they have a strong vision for what they want for their piece. If, you know, let's say they've read a play by a playwright that they really, really like, and they think, oh, I think I know how to put this on stage in a way that'll be really fun or really engaging for an audience. This story needs to be told, and I'm the one that needs to tell it, right? So a director needs to have vision as well. And we'll get into what that really means a little bit later on. A director is also in charge of leading both the performers and the designers during rehearsals and meetings, okay? So the director is in charge of leading these rehearsals and these meetings. So they're in charge of 2 of the other branches, basically, of the 4 branches. They can't really control the playwright, right? Because the playwright has already written the play. Sometimes if the playwright is still living and comes into rehearsals, the playwright can make changes if the director and the playwright are talking about it and they have a good relationship. They think, oh, maybe I need to rewrite this scene a little bit, change the dialogue, something like that. But the directors, I would say, are not in charge of the playwright. They're in charge of the performers and the designers because they really want to make sure that that vision that they have is being carried out by the performers. When they talk to the actors, right, they want to make sure they know where to move on stage and, you know, helping them convey the right kind of emotions for their character, making sure those characters are convincing to the audience. And for the designers, right, they have meetings about how the stage should look, right, how the lighting should be in certain scenes, if there are certain sound cues that need to happen, right? The director talks about what they want those things to look and sound and feel like. Yeah. So that's the main purpose of a director, right? It's a really big job. It's a really big undertaking for one person to be in charge of a whole team of people. So it's not easy, but it can be very, very fun if you have the right team of people underneath you. So those are directors. We're going to move on now. I've got two pictures of directors here on the screen. The first there on the left is a woman named Julie Taymor, and the person on the right is a man named George C. Wolfe. So these are both directors who have directed very successful productions on Broadway. You may not be familiar with, you know, who they look like, what they look like, and that's generally because, you know, they're not on stage. We don't really see them. So it's not like when we saw Will Smith last week in my PowerPoint, you went, oh, I know who that is, right? These are not necessarily recognizable faces, but that's okay. They're very, very important people in theater. So Julie Taymor, would start with her on the left, is one of my favorite directors. She directed a little play that you may be familiar with called The Lion King on Broadway. If you see on the bottom picture, that's her in action. So she's directing one of those actors there, who's got the big mask on, and I guess she might be choreographing his movement there. But this production is one of the most successful, longest running Broadway productions to date of modern times. It's been running on Broadway for years, and it's had national tours and things like that. So I would say Julie Taymor is a very, very successful director for Broadway. And she's also gone on to direct some films as well. She directed a film called Frida, which is about Frida Kahlo, the artist. And so she started out in theater as a director, but then she transitioned over to film, which is what directors do sometimes. They start in theater and then they decide, oh, I want to try out film. Because there are a lot of similarities between directing theater and directing film. So George C. Wolfe, who's our guy over there on the right, the famous production that he directed is the original production on Broadway of a play called Angels in America. This is it's not a musical, unlike Lion King. It's just what they call a straight play, and it's actually two parts. It's basically two plays smashed together into one. I like to think of it as the Lord of the Rings of plays because it's very long. It's got a lot of story to it, a lot of different characters. And if you'll see there on the bottom, there's an element of kind of magical qualities to it. There are characters in there that are not entirely human, right? It's called Angels in America. You see there's an angel there, and it's kind of a sad play too. It's I would say more of a play for adults, for older people. But he became very successful after that play had a run on Broadway, and he's done several other productions on Broadway since. But he's been directing since the 90s. And I think he's done some films as well. I'm not entirely sure. I'll have to check about that. But yes, so these are two examples of famous directors who have had a lot of success on Broadway. And it doesn't, being a successful director doesn't mean you have to get to Broadway. Some people, they don't really care about being on Broadway. They care about just doing really good productions. So, success doesn't equal Broadway in the theater. That's what I always say to people, just as a reminder. I've never been on Broadway. I don't know if I really plan to, but I would consider myself successful because of the productions that I have done and the people that I've been able to work with in the theater anyway. So success is all dependent on what you want, not what you think other people want for you. So great. So those are some examples of some well-known successful directors. So a director has to start the process of creating a show very early on. And one of the first things that a director has to do is hold auditions. So let's say I'm a director and I've chosen a play that a playwright has written, and the play has 3 characters in it. So, okay, so I need to find 3 performers who are going to be able to fit those roles correctly. So a director holds auditions, and they call in actors to come in and try out for these roles, to audition for these roles. So this is kind of a visual example of how an audition might look. You see the person in the red shirt, that is the person who's auditioning, that's the performer. And then you see a bunch of people who are behind a table there. And I expect one of those people is definitely the director, okay? Some other people who might be behind that table, oftentimes a director hires what's called a casting director, who is a person in the theater who knows a lot of actors and brings in certain actors to help with auditions. There might also be a couple of people from the design team backstage, back behind the table. Set designer, maybe the director has an assistant director, someone who helps them direct. And sometimes also there's a musical director. So if the play is a musical, the director has someone who's in charge of the musical aspect of it. So during an audition, it usually takes the whole day. The director is behind that table from 9 in the morning until 5 in the evening, and they're seeing auditions from actors the whole day. So yeah, and auditions, depending on what kind of production it is, sometimes actors are asked to bring a monologue, so they're asked to perform a speech by themselves. Sometimes they're asked to perform sides, which are scenes from the actual production that's going to happen. And sometimes they're asked to come in and bring a song, which the director and the whole team will be able to see. Usually auditions don't take very long. As the actor, you only get 5 to 10 minutes in the room to prove what you got. And then that's it. And then they bring in the next person. And then at the end of the day, if auditions are over, then they have a long meeting, all those people behind the table, and they talk about everybody that they've seen. And they think, oh, you know, this person was really good for this role. This person was really good for that role. I don't think this person is right for this production. And they talk about it as a group. So usually it takes more than one person to decide ultimately what the actors that they want to have in this production will be. So I put in, if you remember, if you were with us the very first week, we created our own mini play that had 3 characters in it. We had a grandmother character, a grandson, and then we had a shark, right? So if we were the directors in this, for this play, we would need someone who could play maybe a little boy who could show us that he was energetic, and maybe he would be on the smaller side, right? And then we'd have to get an older actor or someone who could play an older actor for the grandma character. And then for the shark, right? If you're the director, you have a few options here. You can choose to cast another actor to play that shark, and then you could get the costume designer to create a really cool shark costume. You could also choose to have the shark be an animatronic design piece. So you don't get an actor to play this role, but you get someone on the design team to create a really cool looking shark that can move and can be played around the space. Or you can have the shark become a puppet. So you can get someone on the design team to design a puppet, and then you would have to audition and then hire a puppeteer to be able to move that shark piece. So so that was just an example. You know, if you had a play that was the play that we wrote 2 weeks ago, you would have the actors come in, and then you would use the writing here on the side, which is our scene, to show, you know, to have them read out that those lines from the scene. And then, you know, so if the grandma came in, they would read the grandma lines, and then someone behind the table would read the grandson lines. They'd go back and forth the audition. Sometimes the director would give notes after they've auditioned and say, oh, I really liked how you played the grandma in that scene. Could we try it again? And this time, instead of playing that you're 70 years old, could you play 90 years old? So then the actor would make an adjustment, and then the director could see if they're able to take notes well. So that's an example of what the audition process is like. Then once you've cast all of your actors, you get into rehearsals. So here are 2 examples of what a rehearsal process looks like. On the left, you see all of the performers and probably people on the design team who are gathered around a table. This is usually what the very first rehearsal looks like. It's called a first read through. So the actors don't know, you know, what the costumes are going to look like. They don't know where they're going to be moving. They don't know any of those things. But they are going to be reading through the script to get a sense of how the story goes. And then that's a chance for the director to kind of get to know everybody, introduce everyone, and talk a little bit about what vision they have for the play. And then on the right, you'll see maybe this is a rehearsal that's a little bit farther along, maybe in the second week or so. And this looks like a rehearsal for a musical, because it looks like they're rehearsing a song, and there's a person behind the piano there. And then I wonder who the director is in this picture. Look at all those people, and Yeah, it looks to me like if there was a director in this picture, it would be the woman in the long blue skirt over on the right next to the piano player, right? So she's looking at all of those performers and maybe telling them how to sing louder, you know, et cetera, et cetera. So that's what the rehearsal process looks like. This is really the time for the director to shine, because it's a several week process, and rehearsals, you know, they start off, you know, with everyone sitting down at the table, but then everybody has to get up on their feet and they have to start working. And rehearsal is a process of practice and perfection, right? So things start off very general, and then as the weeks go on, they get more and more specific up until opening night when you have your performances. And that's kind of when a director is finished, is when the show opens and performances start, because then there's nothing more to direct. The show is complete because there's an audience, and then the director can just sit back and watch what they've created. So that's the end of the process for them. Kind of like, you know, not the end of the job for the designers or the actors for sure, because they have to do the same thing every night. But for the director, their work is done. So great. So now we're going to be talking a little bit about the different types of stages that a director might come across. So let's see. I'm going to screen share one more time. There are 4 main types of stages that a director could use for their production. The first type is probably the most common, and it's called a proscenium stage. If you'll see all of these pictures, they show the audience all facing one way. And the stage is also, you know, very much like a box. The audience is facing towards the stage. And the way it's called a proscenium stage because there's always an arch kind of framing the stage. You'll see on both of those pictures. At JCAL, we have a proscenium stage, both in our little black box space where we have our normal classes and the big JPAC space. Those are both proscenium stages. The next type of stage that we have is called a thrust stage. It's called a thrust stage because the stage juts out a little bit, and there are actually 3 sides of audience instead of just one side. So if a director is working with a thrust stage, they have to think about positioning the actors and the set pieces and all of that to be open enough for everybody in the audience to see them, right? So they don't want their actors to have their backs turned to a certain part of the audience, because then the audience won't get to see the action. They'll be blocked off from that. So that's something a director needs to think about if they are putting on a play in a thrust stage. The third type of staging or stage is called a traverse stage. I like to think of this stage as the runway stage. And I included a picture there on the right of a model runway, you know. And that's because there are audiences on either side of the stage. The stage is usually a long rectangular piece, if you'll see that picture on the bottom. And the audience can see each other on either side. So that's a really interesting staging to do as well. Again, directors have to think about making sure that audiences on both sides can see the action. So they have to have some equality in the staging of things. But it can be a really fun thing to go see a play that's in the traverse configuration. And the last one, this is one of my favorite staging options, is a theater in the round or arena staging. So if you'll see here, the audience is all around the stage. It's a 360. And the stage is usually round instead of square or rectangular. So there are a lot of really cool staging options you can do here because you've got audience all the way around you. So it can be difficult too if you're a director staging things in the round, because you don't want people to block each other. You want to make sure everybody, no matter what part of the audience they're in, that they can see everything. But it can also be like a very exciting experience to see a show in the round. So those are the 4 types of stages. We are now going to get up on our feet because we're going to finish up class with a little game. So we're going to, I'm going to move my computer here so I have a little bit more space. And while I'm doing that, if you could get set up and stand up in your space, in your room, wherever you are, we're going to talk about the different parts of a stage. And we're going to use the proscenium stage as our main example. Here we go. Yeah, let's get on our feet. Oops, here. We're going to get up on our feet. And we are going to pretend that the room that you are in now is a stage. Okay? So we're going to learn about the different parts of a stage. It's very important for the director as well as the actors to know the parts of the stage, because oftentimes during rehearsal, a director will say, "Actor 1, I need you to move downstage this line." Okay? Now you'll know. So where I'm standing right now, I would call this center stage. Okay? I'd like everyone to just stand right in the middle of their room. Center stage. Okay? So this is very easy to remember. Center stage is right plop in the middle. You're not close to the audience, you're not far away from the audience. Center stage. Okay? So great. If I move closer to the audience, you can move closer to your screen, the audience, you are moving downstage. Okay? So downstage also always means closer to the audience. Okay? So you're taking a step forward. If you're moving backward, you get all the way to the back of the stage here, you are upstage. Okay? So you are away from the audience, you are upstage. Great. So I'd like you to move downstage, move upstage, and move center stage. Great. Okay, so those are our three directions this way. What about our directions going this way? So if I am moving, if I'm the actor, and this is my left, hard to tell because I think the screen is this is my left side. If I'm moving this way, stage left. Okay, everybody move stage left for me, please. Left. Great. But this is stage left. Okay, director tells you move stage left. Always the actor's left. Now, if the director is directing this way, it's actually the director's right. Right? So it's the actor's left, but the director's right. So for a director, they have to switch their left and right. Great. So that is stage left. This way obviously would mean stage right. So if the director wants you to move stage right, you are moving this way as the actor, and you are moving the director's left. Right? Cool. Great. We also have a couple of other parts of the stage. If you're not on stage at all during this time, the director wants you to move off stage, you are going to wait in what's called the wing. Okay? So let's pretend that there are curtains here on either side, stage left and stage right, and you are waiting for your cue to go on stage. You're not on stage yet, but you're about to. You are waiting in the wing. Okay, so let's everybody stand center stage, point to either side, and say wing. Okay, great. These are your wings. Wonderful. Oftentimes, too, in a proscenium stage, there's a part below the stage that's actually lower. It's kind of like a basement area almost. And this is where the orchestra can be if they're down there. And you know, if it's a musical, oftentimes they're underneath the stage in the front downstage. This is called the pit. Okay, the pit. So everybody stand center stage, and when I say pit, point to where that is. Pit. Great. Wing. Move upstage. Move stage left. Move stage right. Move downstage. Very good. Okay, and the last part of the stage I want to show you is actually right above our heads here. This is where all the lights are, and if you were to do a production of Peter Pan, this is where the wires would come down to hook onto the performers so they could what? Fly. Okay, so this part up here is called the flies. Flies. Okay, so when I say flies, you point to where that is. Flies, pit, wings, downstage, move, move, stage right, move, stage left, move upstage, and move center stage. Very nice job, everybody. Alrighty, that just about concludes our class for today with an emphasis on directing. Next week is our last and final class, and we're going to be exploring designing. Okay, what does it mean to be a designer in the theater? It's going to be a really fun class. I hope you can join us. And have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.